new members today. There's a lot of shifts happening across the network. I think this is probably normal given our large network and environment. But if any of you are new to the RD Leaders Network, welcome. My name is Pauline Tardif, and I'm the National Director of Fundraising and Partnership. And I'm very pleased that you can join us today. Thanks for making the time. We realize we kind of decided to sneak in another shortened RDLN call before the vacation rush, and I appreciate you making that time. As we were talking internally, it was important that we give you an update on the CRM as timely as possible. And this seemed like a good time, and not to take too much of your time before the summer, but before we reconvene end of summer, I thought it might be a good opportunity to do that. I do want to confirm with you before we start that our call will be recorded just for posterity and for future reference. And some people not able to make the call today can maybe make up by listening to the recording. So just wanted you to be aware of that. And as usual, I'll invite you to feel free to use the chat box or raise your hand during the call. So, we can call on you if you have any questions or comments, and we'll do our best, Tiffany and I, to monitor this throughout the call. Et si vous voulez vous exprimer en français, je vous inviterai à le faire, puis on pourrait toujours aider à traduire si nécessaire. Alors, to our French colleagues, please express yourself in the language of choice. And I might do that too, because it's sometimes more comfortable in my mother tongue as well. So before we start, I just wanted to take a few minutes to recognize it's maybe a bit of an understatement, but the challenging recent last few weeks that we've been living through, with a focus on the need for really deep thought, I think, deep reflection, and ideally action in response to the recent tragedies and attacks in our various communities, including anti-racist, anti-Asian, anti-Muslim, homophobic, and of course the most horrific findings of the residential school at the residential schools of unmarked graves of children. So I think this hits us hard as individuals, as Canadians, but definitely hard as a movement as well, because we are so close to much of that work in our communities, and I know that many of us are doing, or at least starting, really important work on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Indigenous collaboration. And I know that uh, many local United Ways are have been at this for a long time, or in recent years for sure. And you may have noticed that recently some important public statements were circulated by the national office, um, um, really responding to these recent tragedies. And I just wanted to reinforce the fact that the national office team and the national board certainly continues to engage with the network to design what will be a thorough DEI and IC strategy. And that strategy, importantly, is being informed by all of you, and our network partners, and certainly those of you who are ahead of the national office and the network in this work. We're really learning a lot from you, and appreciate you engaging in that. And I was reflecting on our agenda today and future agenda topics possibly, and really look forward to bringing this topic at a future RDLN table, because as we start to address these issues, and how we can strengthen our ability to be better at our work. Certainly, I think that there might be shifts in our work needed in the resource development area, and really to make sure that we align and support the DEI and IC strategy as it gets developed for the network, and through the national office in collaboration with the network. So although that's for continued work and later agenda topics, I did just want to make sure to kind of put that on our radar today, and tell you that I'm I'm very confident that we can be proactive leaders in that area and look at how our activities and fundraising can be strengthened really, and how we can improve our work in serving our communities, engaging our volunteers, um, all of our donor engagement environments as well, and just be more reflective of the diversity that we know exists in our communities in all its forms. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that today and thank you for your continued work and focus in this area, and look forward to the future discussions that might bring at this table. For today's agenda, we'll be really focusing our discussion around the recent or the shared CRM. It's recent knowledge for some of us that are newer to the network, and some of you have been following this from a strategy and transformation agenda for the network for a while. And we'll start with a presentation by Poya to provide us with the background on this initiative. Some of you are newer, like me, to the table, so it'll be a good background, a good update on the progress of where this file is at. And we'll save time for discussion and any questions you may have. Poya will lead the briefing, if you will, the sharing of the information, and then we'll invite you to have a conversation around that. So for those of you who have never met Poya, Poya is our VP Strategy and Transformation. Many of you, I think, have worked with him or his team on various network transformation projects. So I think it's the right time for us to kind of for all of us to at least know this project is happening, and what that might mean for our individual or collective work moving forward. So on that, Poya, I think I'd say over to you, and once you're done, we'll have that discussion.
Thank you,
And I
Pauline.
think you're sharing your screen as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I will do that. And
Thank you.
thank you, Pauline, and hello, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to give you a bit of a sneak peek on the shared CRM strategy and some of the progress that we've been making over the last several months. So I'll start the presentation, and my apologies in advance that some of you may know more than others in terms of the context, what this initiative is about, how it links to the future state. But in the interest of kind of level setting, I'll probably go back a little bit and just try to connect the dots and share with you some of the progress that we've been able to make since the last fall. So I will share my screen, and feel free to put questions in the chat, and time permitting, we'll try to tackle them together as part of the Q&A. So I will share my screen, go off camera. Let me know. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so just a bit of a context, and linking it back to our future state. As you know, in 2018, 2019, we embarked on a future state agenda with the network to take stock of where we are as a network and as part of our 10-year strategic directions. And how has our context changed, and what is a renewed sense of strategy for the network over the next 3 to 5 years? And that included taking stock of our operating environment, what has changed since 2014 around the operating context of United Way and our business in terms of demographic shifts, digital disruptions, and changing donor behavior, and our revenue performance, and what that means in terms of the capabilities that we need and the strategies that we need in going forward. So we were able to really kind of validate that the world is changing fast, and this was accelerated by COVID. And in many ways, United Way is in a similar situation as most organizations struggling with new consumer expectations, facing serious competition from disruptors, midst of digital transformation or digitization before digital transformation, if you will. We're attempting to manage and share data and information at scale internally, externally, and within our own network. And overall, I think this imperative that we need to build an insight-driven culture that's based on data and analytics capabilities. So coming out of the future state process right at the end of 2019, we're able to establish a shared vision and value proposition for United Way as Canada's local community builder, a national network of local experts, and we're able to validate that with the network in terms of endorsement for the future state directions. We identified a series of capabilities that we need to, at a very high level, build and invest in to enhance in order to be successful long term for growth and impact around social expertise, excellent customer, donor, volunteer, stakeholder services and engagement, and this notion of building a modern network of local community builders and enabling effectiveness, efficiency, innovation through shared systems and solutions where possible. And we're also validated and renewed this notion of a target operating model. In other words, what are the things that we could be doing at scale and that are non-core to United Ways, and that can allow, by enabling those through shared infrastructure and or common infrastructure, would enable United Ways to really focus their efforts and resources on mission-driven and relationship-driven activities as local experts and local relationship organizations that United Ways are. And in order to facilitate the progress against those directions, in particular around the modern network modernization, we established a program, network modernization program, to help move towards what we're calling a next generation operating model. This notion of effectively driving effectiveness, efficiency, and innovation through delivery of scaled capabilities where and where possible. You know, in many ways, over the last 5 to 6 years, we've made significant advances in raising expectation of what it means to be a United Ways through membership agreement. As you, some of you know, and many of you would have seen over the past several years, we've made a significant stride as a network in terms of building capacity through regional transformation programs and collaborative organizational structures through regional integrations, etc. And what we realized as part of the future state is that we're behind in many cases in the use of our advanced technologies and capabilities that are needed to be successful in today's environment, and that they require significant investments in infrastructure with scale. Hence this notion of building a network modernization program to explore those options. The objectives, so then coming out of the future state, we give ourselves an objective, series of objectives around network modernization and a path forward in terms of how do we actually explore our opportunities for shared infrastructure and common systems to start working through them methodically. And this kind of slide captures the key steps that we want to take in 2020 and to bring some clarity around, you know, what is it that we're trying to build towards? What are the opportunities for shared infrastructure? Do we have a clear and consistent understanding of what's required? And to establish some alignment, and then begin to decide on a path and explore those opportunities, develop a business case and implementation roadmaps to ultimately identify a core group of United Ways that will step forward to, you know, prototype, pilot as part of the proof of concept before a broader rollout strategy in areas that deem to be most valuable to United Way's local strategies and the network's overall modernization strategy. And this kind of came out of ultimately our assessment, and some of you may recall, and thank you to those who actually responded to our survey. In early 2020, we published a fairly extensive survey of what are the tools that United Ways use, and what are the areas that they feel there is a gap and they would like to make investments, or they anticipate making investments around those tools and capabilities. And we learned a few things that, as a network, we're spending significantly in technology and capabilities, but in a highly fragmented fashion. And we know that most United Ways are using legacy systems that are highly customized, which limits our ability to scale and share lessons, learnings, training capabilities across the network. And there was a limited understanding of modern capabilities and innovative practices that could really simplify our business processes and enable our activities to be more focused on managing relationships and enabling our local expertise when it comes to community investment and impact. We also learned that many United Ways are starting, and this became more emphasized as a result of the COVID experience, that many United Ways are beginning to explore, are planning to explore technology and capability upgrades. And what we wanted to really do was to support, and instead of having United Ways do their own due diligence 70 plus times over, how do we enable shared research and development opportunities to really bring in some insights and value add directions for the network as United Ways can contemplate those decisions locally. So this was the roadmap in 2020, and about 3 months in, we were hit with COVID. So we really had to prioritize, and I'll speak to that a little bit. But what we tried to do over the course of last year is to maintain a focus on this effort, while many United Ways had to really respond to the COVID pandemic context that we're still in. And just as a quick note, to support the program, we also established an accountability and an engagement structure. So this slide really speaks to what we're kind of calling transformation leadership from network level governance and leadership. And what we put together coming out of 2019 into 2020, established a network modernization steering committee, which is made up of 7 United Ways from across the country, representing various market sizes and geographies, to provide guidance and insights into the various initiatives that we would take within this broader network modernization program. So in early 2020, as I mentioned, we essentially surveyed the network to look for opportunities, and through some engagements with key networks, as well as some experts, outside experts, and the Network Modernization Working Group, we established what we're calling here a level 1 target architecture for shared systems and solutions. And what really this speaks to is the map of opportunities where we could make progress on exploring essentially shared or common business solutions for United Ways. And I'm deliberate in saying shared or common because that's part of the discovery, i.e. Should we be looking at shared infrastructure, or is it better that we look at a common infrastructure, and what are the constraints and opportunities associated with each one of those pathways? This is kind of the map of the opportunities, engagement platforms. How do we enable the direct to donor while maintaining the workplace engagement model? What are the digital marketing platforms or the engines to execute on the strategy and publishing of the content? What are the marketing services that support our engagements through content and strategy, enabled by the core, which is CRM or XRM, because customers, in our case, volunteer advocates, boards, and in some cases, direct service recipient of United Ways. So how do we then power those relationships through next generation CRM capabilities? And so all of this supported by data, which is really the glue and the tissue that connects all of our core capabilities as United Ways together. And then there are processing and productivity and administrative systems that really enable the business model, if you will. So this was the map, and when we engaged with the working group, we had a series of explorations around what are the preferred paths that we want to explore to really activate projects and to start looking at options, evaluate solutions, and bring forward recommendations and ultimately a business case for further development of these potential solutions. And as I mentioned, because of COVID, we had to calibrate and prioritize, which we did. And one of the core priorities that were identified was around CRM and data. So I won't talk too much about data. It is certainly linked into CRM, but CRM was one of the core areas as one of the key capabilities that really many United Ways use and or need to sustain and enhance their relationship management capabilities. But it's also a core technology that enables other digital capabilities like marketing automation, like digital engagements. And then we know many United Ways need to move from legacy systems that largely are developed in the 90s and are having to think about transitioning in coming years, and particularly in our increasingly data and security and privacy conscious environment, as that's become a risk factor for many United Ways to consider. So we put together a project team in late fall or early fall of 2020, and with representatives from across the country and support from Deloitte Digital to really tackle these three key questions. What is the CRM platform that could enable the capabilities that we need? We looked at a series of options. What is the implementation model that we want to strive for, common versus shared? And by that, think about a solution, a common solution where it gets implemented and supported locally, and or a shared infrastructure where we develop a baseline solution that gets implemented locally, but it could be supported through some level of shared management construct and overseen by a shared governance framework. And ultimately, what would be the target state, validating the target state architecture for technology landscape, and what are the steps that we will need to take as part of the bringing these concepts and learnings to life. So I'll skip through this, but very briefly, we had to establish some really core principles, and the one or two that I will highlight here. Early on, we had to establish the principles against which we wanted to engage in our discovery. And the core pieces that we really wanted to focus on is this notion of local by design, i.e. how do we balance the idea of local flexibility and innovation and adaptation with the need for strategic coherence and interdependencies between markets, to interoperability standards, common data models, and standard business processes. And the second one that I would highlight is this notion of understanding the individual first component. And one of the key lessons from Future State was that individual is the single most important unit of success in our relationships. While we primarily engage in workplace, and the workplaces are still representing 80% of our revenue base as a network, what we're learning is that that the employees inside workplaces are what matters most to both employers and in our relationships with employers and those individuals as the core part of our relationship drivers. So this notion of having a deep understanding of how people interact with United Ways and how we can optimize our interactions with United Ways, which often gets captured in this notion of having a 360 view of the donor or volunteer and or our advocates. So with those principles, what we then had to do as part of our discovery is to look at what are the functional capabilities at the high level that we need the system to do. And so we established a series of high-level functionality requirements. What would, again, customer journeys, what's the user experience and interface, and how will they be done through the system? So what are the technical capabilities? What degree of customization we're going to need, level of integration, security, how will we maintain it, and the reliability and availability in terms of the system performance. And ultimately, what would be the operational and governance capability requirements? In other words, if we're going to develop something that is designed for more than one United Way, either in a common distribution model or a shared distribution model, how are we going to make decisions? How are we going to ensure that we're working towards harmonizing business processes? How do we collaboratively make decisions around system roadmap, enhancements, and to ensure that there is this, we're facilitating a continuous improvement mindset as part of the roadmap, and knowing that it's not a one and done type implementation. So we established some criteria, and then we looked at a series of options. And so one of the first questions, as I mentioned, was this: do we want to build for shared, or do we want to build for common? And we also looked at what are the platform choices that are available to us. And as you know, there are, there are about 5,000 marketing technology platforms out there, if not more today. And there are hundreds of donor management systems or CRM platforms out there. Our core principle was that we are going to look at tier 1 solutions for sustainability and a commercial upgrade path. We wanted to make sure that we're selecting a solution that's built for the future. So we looked at essentially the tier 1 providers, and that puts us in the categories of Salesforce and Blackbaud as well, which has 2 products, as well as Microsoft, which has recently developed a not-for-profit accelerator package on the CRM side of things. And as I mentioned, from an operating and governance model, we had to look at a series of options in terms of how do we want to govern this solution going forward. So the continuum of this being from decentralized, which is kind of our current state, all the way to centralized from a spectrum perspective, and what would be the best fits for the United Way CRM solution. Coming out of phase 1, the group came up with a series of recommendations for validation by the CEO working group. So we landed on a shared CRM organization, or an instance, so a single instance of a multi-tenant platform for United Ways to implement locally, where the configuration, support, development, and maintenance will be managed by a group of experts centrally and overseen by an established Center of Excellence governance model. The rationale for this decision was around how it enables a true 360-degree view of our stakeholders across the network, gives us some uniformity in functionality and capabilities across United Way, alleviates the technology and IT burden from United Ways, and enables the reallocation of resources from United Ways to other, from IT and system management to other core capabilities like data analytics and relationship management, and certainly gives us economies of scale around developing expertise in managing these types of solutions, leveraging central regulatory and privacy risk capabilities, shared maintenance, and certainly shared costs or group benefits in licensing and relationships with the vendors. We landed on Salesforce CRM as a core platform, and for those of you who are familiar, in specific the Salesforce Not-for-Profit Cloud, or the Not-for-Profit Success Pack, which is a specialized purpose-built edition of the core Salesforce CRM platform as the preferred tool. And this was largely due to the flexibility of the system and the ecosystem that Salesforce has, and enables us to build new capabilities in a fairly easy, or what's referred to as no-code, low-code approach for integration. And it certainly has a very robust commercial grade upgrade path, which is important in case of maintenance and security, as well as an overall value from a future cost perspective. Seem to be the best option. For the governance, we landed on a center of excellence model, which is in the middle, so it's not centralized. It's not decentralized, and what it really is an engagement model with a set of functions and approaches on how we could collaboratively enable planning, investment, delivery, and support of new capabilities. It gives us that collaborative governance framework, and most importantly, it allows us to leverage local resources and expertise in activities that require local subject matter expertise and understanding of operations. Something we don't have at United Ways Entraide Canada, and in order to facilitate that gap, the Center of Excellence would really enable that. And thirdly, the Center of Excellence also allows us and allows United Ways with the flexibility to either adopt the model or not, or adopt part of the solution that gets built as part of this Center of Excellence, depending on where they land and when they are in terms of their business maturity and business cycle. But it also provides United Way Canada and the network the flexibility to scale as appropriate into other solutions if there are interest from United Ways for additional capabilities, such as marketing, for example. So coming out of that phase one, we had to bring additional clarity as to, well, how are we now going to configure our platform? And we had a series of options to look at. Some of you know that United Way Worldwide has been on this path of shared infrastructure over the last 5 years and have made significant investments in that space. So one of our key objectives were to really understand how can we leverage the development that's been that had been done at United Way Worldwide. Is there an opportunity for us to leverage that development? And closely tied to that is when we're talking about the Center of Excellence, well, how are we going to actually structure it? How would we make decisions? How do we fund the Center of Excellence? So that was our phase 2 activities, which we started in February of this year. Went through an 8-week sprint with the project team, again supported by Deloitte, to give us some directions going forward. On the configuration, we ultimately landed on, for several reasons, complexities of the systems and challenges associated with governance of the solution. We landed that on our best path forward was to proceed with what we're calling a leveraged approach. And that means that we will proceed with building a parallel Canadian solution, look for opportunities to leverage UWW and other implementations. And there are United Ways across Canada that have recently implemented a Salesforce CRM solution that where we can leverage those developments where and if appropriate. And what this would really allow us to do is to ensure there is Canadian ownership and responsibility for the product support and the roadmap. And we can work with a Canadian selected system implementation and a business partner while maintaining a close connection with UWW around common data models and business process standards when and if appropriate. On the Center of Excellence, that was the key part of the phase 2 developments, and we really wanted to tackle, what are the expectations and commitment required from United Ways in order to take part in this model, and what are the key groups and roles within these groups that will best align and support the need of the solution. How do we make decisions, for instance, and ultimately how best we can fund this solution going forward, or this initiative going forward. I won't talk too much about the COE framework because I think this might get us into the weeds a little bit, but just to give you some sense of what are the key components that we had to tackle around the Center of Excellence is how do we actually design the solution and govern it? What would be the technical governance, i.e. How do we establish data, business process, privacy and security policies and maintain those? How are we going to implement and service the solution? How do we make decisions overall? And what are the strategic alignment with network modernization and the strategic direction of the program going forward? And again, how do we resource the program? And in thinking about all of that, we had to also consider that we need to have a startup period consideration, i.e. we're not going to be able to bake a full governance model right up front. So what would be the startup considerations where we'll have to think about it as a project-based approach, which is where we've developed this notion of pilot and co-creators as a startup makeup of this startup group to help us build out this initiative, and then what is it going to morph into during this steady state. And the concept of pilot and the co-creators are really the distinction between the two are that the pilots are those United Ways that are going to be implementing the solution in the short term, and the co-creators are the United Ways that are anticipating implementation, but are not ready for implementation as part of the first cohort. So the idea of being able to not skew the design decisions around those who are ready to implement and make sure we're designing a scalable solution with more design input, but also to deepen the subject matter expertise pool for all of those design considerations that we're going to need to have as part of this startup. So I'll just flash this in terms of, the different components of the governance ecosystem around technical governance, solution design, servicing, strategic oversight, and how it's supported by the project team. And this is kind of the steady state model that the initiative will morph into as we essentially get on with the first release of the solution anticipated for sometime in 2022, early 2022. On the funding and allocation of the funding, we had to think about what's shared and what's local. And ultimately, what this comes down to is the capabilities that are going to be available to all participating organizations are going to be shared costs. And we're now thinking through what the allocation is, i.e. By market type, by complexity of operation type, And then there are costs that are associated with individual United Ways, such as migration, which really depends on local United Ways data hygiene, cleanliness, change management requirement, and the complexity of business processes that need to be harmonized and aligned with what's being built. So that's a real one-time true individual United Way cost. And the same is around licensing. Again, really dependent on how many people, FTEs, will be using the solution or be touching the solution, and also dependent on the size of organization. So in terms of where we're at today, we have now concluded our phase 2 activities and essentially the concept phase. And we're looking to pivot from conceptualization to what we're calling pilot implementation. And in order to gear up for that implementation stage, we're working with United Ways to confirm their commitment to being a pilot and or a co-creator. And there are significant both financial as well as time commitment on both ends to be able to participate in the initiative. So we're in those discussions with the project team and confirming their roles. We're also looking to identify the Center of Excellence resources that will support the initiative from United Way Canada, finalizing and socializing the funding model, and also in market to select a strategic business partner that will help us design, build, and implement the solution with the anticipated go live timeline of Q1 of 2022 for the first release as part of the pilot implementation. So that's the slides. I know I covered quite a bit of ground, and I think I went a bit over time as well. But I thought, start a little bit in the context and take you through a bit of a journey. But I would pause here and perhaps open the floor for any questions that you may have for clarity. And hopefully I can answer them and I have the answers, but if not, I promise I'll look for them and bring it back to you.
So thanks very much, Poya. That's a lot of information from, we'll circulate the deck just so you're comfortable. And some of those graph charts are pretty small, so it's kind of hard to see on the screen. So we have time for a few short questions, and I'll offer Poya up if there's any follow-up questions after the meeting as well. Please feel free to reach out to him, and we'll certainly try to answer your questions as soon as possible. But we have time for a few comments or questions if any of you want to speak up. And I forgot to acknowledge at the beginning, I know that some of you brought your data folks on the call. Rightfully said they'd be on the project. So if anybody had any questions or comments, maybe raise your hand or get off mute, and I'll give you a moment to speak up. The dreaded Zoom silence. So, Poya, it's possible that your presentation was so comprehensive, there's absolutely no questions. But if you do have a question or a comment, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat so we'll know. So I'll give it another few seconds. Sometimes we need to find the right button. I see you, Bhavana. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Poya. A lot of work has been done. I know we talked about this a couple of months ago, but you've obviously done a lot, so thank you. Have you identified the United Ways for the second round? Like, you've got the ones who are in your pilot. I forget what you call the second term, the co-creators.
So the co-creators are not the second, they're the kind of United Ways that ultimately are anticipating implementation, various reasons of either complexity or where they're at in terms of their own business cycle aren't able to implement as part of the first cohort. So, one of the guidance that we received was make sure that some of the more complex organizations aren't part of the initial implementation for a variety of reasons, but complexity is a key one. So have we identified them? I think we have United Way that have expressed interest in wanting to participate as co-creators, and that's largely coming from the project team that has been engaged from the discovery stages. So we're working with them at this point to confirm their commitment of time and resources in continuing as a co-creator. I can tell you that at this point, I don't have a sense of who is committed. I think we're meeting with them as we speak, and there's discussions internally amongst the leaders of those organizations around the value and the time commitment and the resource commitment that they're going to need to put up in order to participate in the next stage. So the short answer is no. The longer answer is that's in progress.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Poya. I'll take a question from Mark and then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead, Mark.
Not so much a question, Poya, just a thanks for the presentation. I know that we invited, as Pauline had said, we invited Tyson Chen, who's our data person, on the call with Sue and I today, and I think Tyson's been in touch with you, if not directly, then through Ed, I'm sure. But thank you for this. We're certainly harvesting a lot of wisdom from your journey, and trying to both do two things: determine what is the right path for United Way East Ontario, and at the same time look at where we can leverage some of the work that's already been done by the movement more broadly. So we just wanted to say thank you for the work you've done. I'm not sure if Tyson or Sue have any particular questions, but we're certainly there's another group there, not the owners or the leaders or the initiators, but the tertiary benefit people, and we're certainly, at least at the moment, in that sphere. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Mark. I haven't spoken to Tyson, but I had a chat with Ed, and I know that we've shared some material with the team at East Ontario as well. Looking forward to continuing those discussions for sure.
Okay, well, thanks for that comment, Mark. Really appreciate it, and I'll extend my thanks as well, Poya, for joining us and for your presentation. And we'll circulate the slides through communication through Tiffany, as we normally do after the RDLN calls. So we'll loop with you on that. Thanks so much, and I'll let you go because I know you have a busy day, and we'll just continue on our agenda. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you all, and you know where to find me if you have any questions. Bye.
Super, thank you. I was just going to offer you up, so I'm glad you did. All right, so let's just, we just have a few minutes left, and this is the part of me talking at you again, so I apologize in advance, but I did want to just confirm with you that I had a recent meeting with the CAGP, the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. Just as a reminder, Pauline, for those who may not be aware or are new to the network, that we do have a national, yes. Tiffany, I hear you.
Yes, sorry, there's a bit of a lag with your video and your audio right now, so I'm not sure if maybe you want to turn the camera off and see if that helps a bit.
I'll try that. Thank you. Please let me know if it works. So as I was mentioning, we do have a national membership with the Canadian Association of Gift Planners that all United Way Centraide staff members can benefit from. So if you're not presently a member individually or your team members, please reach out to register. The information is on United Way online. And if you need more information, Tiffany did put the links there in the agenda to this GP resources. Or if you have any issues with that, please or challenges, please reach out to Tiffany directly, who can help you as well. I also did want to confirm with you that in that conversation with the CAGP, they have confirmed with me that there's 5 or 6 United Way Centraides, including the national office, that have registered as part of their marketing campaign called Power, Volonté de faire in French. So if you have not considered that, it's not too late to consider it. You have missed the early bird rate. There was a bit of a discount there on the member fee, but if you want to consider that, you can still do that. So just heads up that will be moving forward, and that some United Ways will be involved in that. So it might be useful after the campaign in 2021, which will happen in the fall period, to loop back with this team to tell you, what the results were, if any, positive ones for you to consider moving forward. As we renegotiate our agreement with CAG and the possibility of extending that national membership that has been in place now for a few years, I have asked them to consider what a Willpower campaign participation membership might be for the whole of the network, as we have with the membership. That look like if we had a Willpowership as a network, so that every United Way could benefit from being featured in that marketing campaign. So that meeting will happen at end of 2022. If we have negotiated that on behalf of the network, we'll certainly let you know before you register or re-register in the Willpower campaign if you are already part of it in 2021. So I'll just move ahead in the essence of time, and then maybe we'll have a few minutes at the end to take questions on these few points at the end. Environics data. So you may be aware that the National Office has recently acquired a basic set of Environics analytics data sets to help inform our work in the community investment area. It's still at a very preliminary stage, but really it's work that will be ongoing to help understand how we can benefit from these data sets to help improve our work in community investments. And in my understanding that work was happening on the community investment side, I've had a discussion with some of my peers in the strategy and transformation team to say, well, what about fundraising? What kind of data points are we collecting, or that we might want to collect as a network or individual United Ways to benefit our work in RD? And might some of that Environics analytics data be acquired perhaps to benefit our own work individually or collectively? So I wanted to bring that to the table today because there is an important discussion we need to have around what data points we might want, and does Environics analytics have that, or do we have that within our network, and what we might do together to improve our ability to connect with donors or potential prospective donors. So one of the things that I've suggested to our colleagues in Poya's team is, what if we brought together a few, 5 or so people from the RDLN, so from this table, to really start talking about data points and what we do work with as fundraisers, and what we might want to benefit from as a network or individual United Ways. So what I invite you to do is, if that sort of work, or maybe you are doing already that kind of work in your United Way, or you're interested in doing that work either individually or collectively, I'm looking for about 5 volunteers in the United Way network to either signal to me, well, just call me or send me an email to let me know you might be interested. And then we'd work together on that to kind of see what the lay of the land is, if you will, and maybe bring back to the table here some sort of a plan as to where we might go in the future and whether the national office can play a role there to support the network in that work. So I'll just leave it at that, and hopefully some of you will be interested in that work and let me know. And it's not something that's pressing, but I think it's something we could start in the latter part of 2021 and maybe plan for some work together as an RDLN team into 2022 and beyond. And, there'd be budget implications and things like that. But, is there something that we want to get on to, given that our CI colleagues are already, moving ahead with that type of initiative. So we collect a lot of data points in terms of fund development activities at every level. And so, do we want to reinforce our capacity to get prospects identified, or how to move people from into major gift territory or planned giving or things like that that might lead to revenue diversification, for instance. So the final point, and then I'll see if there's a few comments or questions, but is around a spring 2022 meeting. So Tiffany and I are keen on trying to understand what the frequency of meetings of this team might be. The last time we connected with you, we sort of agreed with a lot of comments supporting it that we would meet on a quarterly basis, but there is value in the potential of an in-person meeting. And I wanted to get a bit of your feel as to whether or not you'd be open, circumstances of the pandemic pending, to maybe meet in the spring of 2022. And if so, we could put a date in our calendar as a whole, then see what happens by the fall or early winter season, and maybe work towards that. So can I have any comments or questions on any of those three topics?
Well, Pauline, speaking as a relative newcomer, I've had very limited opportunities to actually meet movement colleagues in person. It's been a lot of screens, and I did get to go to one conference, but that was, seems like ages ago now. So when it's appropriate and when there's enough kind of critical mass that everybody feels safe enough to gather in person, I'd certainly welcome the opportunity to join an in-person meeting. If for nothing else, I'm sure, there'll be much value in the formal agenda, but even the informal opportunities to meet colleagues would be welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that comment. Bhavana, I hear you regarding the Environics data. So, thank you for reinforcing that that it can be useful. Yes, it can be expensive, and this is part of the reason why I want to have the discussion about, if we can do something at the national level and perhaps together as a network, it might be useful. I don't know if that's a volunteering. I want to be part of the conversation, but if it is, I'd welcome an email directly to me to signal that, and we can keep people posted as well. Andrew, over to you.
So I'm in Windsor. Hi, everybody. I'm not sure that I've met a number of you. Some of you are familiar faces when we had a chance to get to meet in person, but we have been doing some of the work on the CI side with the folks in the transformation piece, looking at the Environics data, and I've seen some of the data sets they've acquired. Some of it is directly related to RD, but would require us to think about working in different ways, I think, particularly as it relates to individual donors and looking about what that opportunity is. So I would encourage you to look at that if you have a major gifts program or a planned giving program particularly, or you're doing some direct mail targeting, because there's information about all the way down to, kind of census data block about, giving preferences, education levels, and all those kind of things that we haven't had access to. Our challenge is also then in having a business process to use that information, right? But I think it's definitely worth a look at and trying to figure out how we adapt RD to do that.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate that support. I mean, we do our work driven by data anyways, right? So kind of looking at what might be useful and what type of data, and you know what type of data do we have, and what type of data would be useful to add to that and layer on to what's already existing within our own CRMs or any kind of technology that we have. So. Any other comments or questions before we bring it to a close? I realize we're up against a half hour.
I just had one other thing to say, if I could.
Please.
So I've really enjoyed being part of the RD Leaders Network for the last few years and getting to know a bunch of you. I've been working with Poya and some of the piece on the database transformation piece. As many of you may know, I'm part of the finance and operations team at Our United Way, and I've been working with RD as a way of trying to build more capacity in that side of it, but working with Leslie, who you will know. Leslie's going to continue to be part of the RD Leaders Network, but I'm going to step away from that because Our United Way is going to be one of those pilot United Ways that's working towards this shared CRM solution. So as one of the roles and visions that we wanted to take into this was to really make a tool that's usable for United Ways at different sizes across the movement, and figure out how we can actually build some capacity and some database tools that would actually give us a better quality donor experience. And I've been encouraged by the commitment from the United Ways that have been around these planning tables that this is a bit of an opportunity for a game changer at United Way. It's something that I haven't seen in the 15 years I've been in the United Way movement. That we really have an opportunity to think about putting some tools at the center of our work which would enhance the donor experience and build our capacity for the future. So I'm going to step away from this group to be more engaged in that, but I want to assure you that we're really having a strong lens on the donor experience as we do that, and also think about how we build our capacity as ways to work together in a more meaningful way. So don't hesitate to reach out to me, any of you, if you want kind of some thoughts of what our experience is like for that and how we're going to go. Edmonton is also one of the other partners in that, and they have a lot of capacity on the technology side. But there is a critical mass and a reason to move this way in a way that I haven't seen, and it seemed very encouraging. So I know we've been through shared stuff before. We've tried and failed and haven't done it. And there is some skepticism about, can this be done and can this be pulled off? But I think it is a business imperative that we have to figure out how we do this if we're going to build capacity as a proper movement and behave that way. And a lot of those things are cultural. They're not just technical solutions. So this is about business process. It's about different ways of working together. It's not about the technology as much as the rest of it. So I just want to encourage you to kind of be open-minded and please keep asking questions. And thank you, I've enjoyed working with lots of you.
Those are great closing comments. I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, everybody. Just a reminder, Tiffany will be setting out the recording and the links to the information and the slides. So if there's anything, you know where to find us. And if not, have a great summer. We're hopefully vacation for all of you is planned, and I know it is for us. So look forward to seeing you later this summer at our meeting in August. So thanks a lot, everybody, and take care.
Thanks all.